everybody knew I was the Star Wars girl nerd. I was the girl nerd in my school. Like, I really didn't know that many girl nerds for many, many years.
Hello there. This is Dave, and I'm an original trilogy kid.
And this is Alora. I'm a prequel trilogy kid. Welcome to What Does Star Wars Mean to You, the show where we talk to all kinds of fans of Star Wars to take the hate out of the debate and look at the franchise from a certain point of view, one fan at a time.
That's right. And today is our first What Does Star Wars Mean to You interview for season 4.
Crazy. Season 4. Yeah.
I know. So our guest today is Jendia Gammon. She is a Nebula and BSFA Awards finalist author of fantasy, sci-fi, horror, and thriller novels. She has 2 books coming out this April. On April 7th is the first in a trilogy of dragon fantasy novels called The Vale of Seven Dragons. And on April 21st, it's the release of the Choose Your Own Adventure book called Dungeon Crawl at the Haunted Mall. Which
fun.
I know, I'm very excited about it. As a fan of the original 1980s Choose Your Own Adventure books, I'm kind of excited about it. And also, she's a self-professed nerd and an original trilogy kid whose love for Star Wars contributed to her not just going into the creative fields, but science as well. And we'll talk all about how Star Wars fandom influenced her throughout her life.
It's one of my favorite conversations. I'm so excited. It's kicking off our What Does Star Wars Mean to You season. I love Jendia. I thought she was so interesting. Her perspective on Star Wars was fascinating. Her creative mix with science. I want to have her back on. I think we're going to tease that ahead of time. I think that's already been decided.
Yes. Oh, yes.
We had a great chat with her, and I just can't wait for you to hear it.
Should I say it? Am I going to do it again this year? Luke, we're going to have company! I think that's the corniest, dumb thing, and I love doing it.
I like it.
What we always like to ask first is, are you ready to share with the world what does Star Wars mean to you?
I am ready.
It's our favorite answer. It is our favorite answer.
The Force is with me.
Good. Hopefully it's with us all.
Yes, we need it.
Yes.
Especially now. Okay, do you want me to take 5 with the Force, Dave?
Sure.
All right. So of the films, which is your Star Wars guilty pleasure?
The Empire Strikes Back.
Great.
Yeah.
Solid choice.
Oh, it's always a solid choice. And I'm assuming you're an original trilogy kid. We refer to her Alora's a prequel trilogy kid. I'm an original trilogy kid. And I feel like with original trilogy kids, Empire Strikes Back is always number 1.
Yeah. Usually. I hear a lot of the first, A New Hope, but the real ones were always like, no, it's Empire.
Yes.
No, they're all valid. In my opinion, Star Wars is a big universe, and I'll keep coming back to that probably. So
yeah. Let's roll a d6. What do we got?
4.
Okay. Do you have a favorite droid?
R2.
Another solid choice.
Yeah, and I named my budgie after him, so I have a budgie named R2.
Awesome.
I'm assuming he's a blue budgie.
He's blue and white and gray, so it's perfect.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. He's like the reincarnation. I love it.
I know. My rescue budgie.
Cute. Do you have a favorite line to quote?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'll have to think about that one for a minute. There's so many good ones.
Yes.
Andor, of course, was full of them.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking about everything. And so, but it's all, I always crack up though, anytime anybody is ragging on C-3PO, shut him up or shut him down. I like that one.
There's always a good line to express yourself in the world when you're frustrated with things. Like Star Wars.
Especially with tech.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Anything directed at 3PO is definitely iconic.
Exactly.
Right.
Besides the films, what is your favorite Star Wars content?
Well, I love all of the streaming shows and going back to Clone Wars and going forward more recently. Obviously, Andor spoke about that. I love most of them. I'm a big tent Star Wars fan. So to me, more Star Wars is good Star Wars. I haven't seen everything, but I've seen most of them. And so I kind of feel for pure camp and high adventure, The Mandalorian comes kind of to the fore before thoughtfulness and, everything else. Andor is so spectacular that you can't look away.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. It kind of blew everything out of the water.
Kind of did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also interesting how it shows the range that Star Wars has. Like within this universe, you have something that is a very closer to hard sci-fi representation of the human condition, and then you have just a lot of you have a guy riding the back of a Rancor, which is an awesome thing to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, what George made was kind of piecing together in this amazing quilt, camp and adventure and space western and melodrama, and it was just an amazing cocktail that worked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tremendously. So it's, I love that he's pulled from his own experience and the things that he loved, and he built something. And I feel like as a writer, that speaks to me a lot now. And it did since I was a kid, because I saw that and I was like, I want to do that for me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being an author, our last Five with the Force, we like to kind of cater to our guests' interests or professions a little bit more specifically. And you run a writer's workshop, for San Diego Comic-Con and Star Wars Celebrations. So if you were teaching within the Star Wars universe of the Star Wars characters, who do you think would be the best creative writer?
Who in the Star Wars universe would be the best creative writer? Ooh, gosh, that's a tricky one. A creative writer, because that's where that gets kind of because they're so many times they're so entrenched, right? And you could definitely see them as historical writers or things like that. But as a creative writer, I got to think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Very good question. I'm still cooking on this.
Take your time.
I'm gonna throw Leia.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why, but it seems like the right answer to me as well.
Yeah, because the reason I think why is until she knows, especially before she knows that she's Force sensitive for sure, and she was raised as an only child. Without the knowledge she had a sibling, and she had this beautiful planet. And she was so gung ho and adventurous that I feel like she would have written stories and poetry and everything because she would have been filling out that part of her life that she knew somehow she was missing.
Right.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In Kenobi, it was when you see her as a little girl in Kenobi, she was very much high adventure. She was out, and so I just felt like I could just see that she would be on the sly writing adventure stuff.
Have this incredible internal world within herself because she has to put on a show so much to be in the Senate and in all the politics. Yeah.
I mean, with Padme, I don't think it would have worked as well because Padme was so straight-laced. And let's face it, Leia has Anakin in her. And so there's that blend of the two, which, Obi-Wan tells her, basically that she's the best of both worlds, which I think is true. And was such a loving and touching moment to hear that in that show, which I totally cried.
Yeah.
Same.
Exactly. She really is that girl. Let's be real.
She is that girl. No, I love that. What a thoughtful response. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's our Five with the Force. Just a quick introduction to get your kind of baseline
Star Wars
fandom.
Baseline.
So let's just start at the beginning. What was your introduction to Star Wars, and can you take us through that experience?
Well, I was there from the beginning. In 1977, I was taken to the theater with my family, and I watched it. I was 3 years old, and I watched Star Wars, and that was it for me forever. And I, of course, at the time, I was like, is Alderaan Earth? Because you see it blown up.
Yeah. That would be terrifying at 3.
I was like, wait a minute. When does this happen? But I quickly course corrected. And I was just obsessed with the droids and Leia, so much with Leia. But I also really was fascinated by Tatooine. I grew up in East Tennessee, which was quite lush in the summers. And to me, that was my first, other than later my dad watching Lawrence of Arabia. That was my first real desert situation where I was I just felt like I was there. I could almost feel the heat coming off the screen. I was always imaginative. And so that was kind of just part of that that was my major step into a larger world.
Into a larger world. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Did you have that same response to Hoth? Because Tennessee's not a
oh my God,
giant snow place, but there is some snow there.
I mean, Star Wars, of course, put me on a path, but Empire solidified it. And Empire being my favorite movie, I mean, immediately I was in it. I felt like I was moving up and down over those hills of snow. And I was so, like, I was in line for that one because at that point I was 6. And, you know, my dad and I were like, I was just in that long line. I just couldn't wait. And I was just so absolutely blown away by Hoth and later Dagobah, you know, and but especially though Cloud City, my soul left my body and I don't think it's ever returned because I was just like obsessed with Bespin and Cloud City, obsessed. And you can kind of tell, like, one of my book covers shows a ship in this sort of atmosphere accretion. Under my Dotson name, and that was absolutely a nod to that.
To Cloud City. Amazing. That's awesome. You had mentioned that you were in line with your dad. Was your dad also a big fan? Did you guys share that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. My family was a family of nerds. My mom, my parents were silent generation, and they grew up when it was like you go pay a nickel and you watch a B movie. So they had seen like all of like the B movie sci-fi and everything. And my mom was, especially as the eldest of eldest daughter of several kids, like she would take her siblings and they would see those campy things. And then as the 60s rolled in, my older siblings, I'm the youngest by several years, they were all watching Star Trek together. So when I was born into a nerd family. And Dad was all steeped in mythology. And so he immediately understood what Star Wars was trying to do. And it shifted his paradigm a bit to take it more seriously. And then later the Star Trek movies, my parents took me to all of those because they loved that cast and they wanted to see all the movies. So I went with them to those, which was a lot of fun. But for Star Wars, one of my older brothers had gone to see it before the rest of us. And he was like, "This is the best movie ever." And Dad was like, "Really?" You know, and so totally skeptical, Dad. And so, but then we all went and he was like, "You know what? That was really good." So he wanted to go see all the rest of them. And then seeing that I was completely Star Wars pilled, he just like, that was, again, I was the youngest. So by the time we went to Empire, like my older siblings were kind of empty nesting. So it was a real great bonding experience with me and my dad. And but my mom loved them too. So like, you know, it was just, we were all in. We were in. It was just really cool. I wanted things that I never got, like the Millennium Falcon. I really wanted it, but I got like Barbie stuff, and I was like, really? So I kind of just started pushing out, and they finally realized, oh, she's a full-fledged nerd and tomboy, and so.
Did you ever get the Millennium Falcon?
No, never got the Falcon.
Never got the Falcon.
I know.
Listeners, we need to fix this.
I know, like when my ship comes in, when my Falcon comes in, I will have, you know. But anyway,
that's incredible. So, how did Star Wars then like impact your day-to-day life as you kind of were coming up in the world?
Oh, I was obsessively imaginative, almost to a fault, because I was already starting to build my own universes in my head, and then drawing and writing them as I got better at both of those things. And everybody knew I was the Star Wars girl nerd. You know, I was the girl nerd in my school. Like, I really didn't know that many girl nerds for many, many years. Because at the time we didn't have the internet. You know, I was in the country in East Tennessee, and I was the girl who's educating the other girls about nerdistry. I was like, "You're coming with me," you know, like, you know, I was steeped in that, and I was also starting to become addicted to bookstores, and I would haunt like B. Dalton and wait for like Starlog magazine and any of the magazines to come in, gleaning any news I could get. Any Star Wars news. I was obsessive. And I would even write to the editors. It was so nerdy. And my brother, the one brother who had introduced us all to Star Wars, we would, whenever we could talk on the phone, which was uncommon because he was, off in the world. But later we would always talk about Star Wars. We would always talk about what do we think it's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then after Return of the Jedi, then we were like, is he going to do the prequels? And then we were talking about that for years.
Yeah.
And we were speculating about all of it, and all the rumors that we found and things that we found in the novelization that we're like, what about that? And what's going to happen? So, in the meantime, I'm just like, it's filtering into everything I do. And I'm realizing that I really want my own space opera. So I made one, and I started it when I was a kid. So, I was always just like starting lots of stories and everything. I even found in one of my old journals from the 80s, I have like this whole planetary system mapped out when I was 10. And
Wow.
I used some of that, and I started an astronomy club among my friends. And we would, because I was obsessed with astronomy as partly a result of Star Wars and Star Trek. I was all in on science, and I was out looking at the night sky, learning about stars and planets, and speculating about, at the time we didn't know for sure, I was speculating about exoplanets, and I would make little newsletters talking about the Centauri system and what kind of creatures it would have. So, I was very much feeling the influence of all this space opera wonder of Star Wars and exotic planets and creatures and plants and everything. So that definitely started to seep into my later life in terms of education as well.
That's incredible. I love this image of like young Jendia. Like, I hear about like the dark times of like between the original and the prequel trilogy, and
so sad.
So sad, but like you took it and you were like, you became a scientist. You created your own worlds. You were like, I'm just going to do it myself. If they're not going to do it for me.
Yeah. I also, my main character of the Quest Saga, Galadea, when I came up with her I also made all the side characters, and at this time, I think there's thousands of illustrations of her with galactic fashions, of some of them quite outrageous. I mean, Bob Mackie would blush. So, it was just, I was all in on the world building, and I still have all of that. I had guides to the planets. I had guides to the plants and animals, maps of the continents and everything. I was completely in, and whatever I could get related to Star Wars, I just hung on to, and anything remotely resembling Star Wars, like Battlestar Galactica, like He-Man, Transformers. I was all in on those as well. And those I kind of clutched onto during the dark times because they all started rolling out right after Jedi, especially. I think everybody was wanting to fill a void, and anime and, cartoons, action figures kind of filled the void for me. And so until I was a teenager, I was still writing. I wrote 2 full books by the time I was 14 in that universe I'd made. And my English teacher took it seriously, and she even approached publishing companies on my behalf. And I even heard from some of them, and they were like, well, you are rather young if you want to build your craft. If not, you can submit this way. So she really believed in what I was doing. And she also taught English and science. So she was the perfect person at the right time to guide me in my career, essentially, without her knowing it. And I filled everything with story and art. And, I finally started meeting other nerds, in high school. And it was a lot of fun. And then, of course, like, I kind of chickened out on the writing front. Life happened. College happened. It was a lot. I went through kind of my own dark ages. Yeah. And then I came out the other side later. So, and then, Star Wars was there.
Wow. You were like a sci-fi entomologist.
Yes. I was thinking metamorphosis is like, I feel like you did go through a couple metamorphoses.
Yeah.
Well, and the importance of teachers that foster that.
Priceless.
Like, it's priceless. Yeah.
I feel like everybody needs somebody at the right time, and she was it,
Yeah.
During, like, after Jedi, before the prequels, you talked about glomming on to, like, Transformers, He-Man. I myself went into G.I. Joe.
Yeah, I was a G.I. Joe fan too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's another, all of them big worlds. A lot of mythology. I think you had said it earlier that George Lucas just really did it kind of perfectly. But as you were going through that, did your fandom for Star Wars wane? Or like, I feel like a lot of times it either goes to sleep in someone and comes back, or it just stays strong.
No, I was always obsessing like I was saying earlier, anytime my brother and I would talk on the phone, we would be talking about what's going to happen. And also, then we got some books that were awesome. I mean, hello, Thrawn.
Yep.
Heir to the Empire. Let me tell you, we all kind of lost our minds when those books started coming out. That was just so great. But also, I was starting to expand a bit into horror. And because of the sci-fi blending of horror, having Alien and then Aliens was just changed everything for me. And so I had that within the gap as well. And I watched The Thing way too young, cold, alone in a dark basement at age 7. Don't recommend, but also it kind of made me who I am. So, I had all of these things I was starting to fill in while I was still obsessed with Star Wars and daydreaming about it and wondering what was going to happen. And again, checking all the magazines. And then when we finally got the freaking internet, then I was all in on X-Files and chat groups, and we were starting to speculate about all these universes together from around the world. And that was a moment of no return in which we finally had access to like what was coming. And then, of course, in the 90s, we had the special editions, and we were there. We were there at the theater.
Wow. What did you think of the special editions?
I loved them. Some of it was a little like, well, that wasn't entirely necessary, but I was all in because, and it's kind of funny. Like now, I actually really love the original, and so do my teenagers. But the special editions to me were like, it was bringing in new generations, and I knew that, and at that point, I was a young adult, and I was enjoying meeting other Star Wars friends for the first time out in the world and having that bonding experience both with them and seeing the younger generations fall in love with Star Wars. That was amazing and priceless to me. And I knew that also as technology had been advancing, I knew we would get the prequels at that point. And I was very excited and happy about that. So, I knew that we were coming out of the the darkness.
New Star Wars on the horizon. I do want to talk about you being an author and the Star Wars impact and how both Star Wars impacted you and how your career as an author, scientist, and publisher kind of also affects your changed or affected your view of Star Wars. It's kind of a two-way lens a lot of times. I think that what you do kind of you start, how do I phrase this?
The influence?
Both
ways?
The influence can go both ways. So like what you do influences the way you see Star Wars, and vice versa. Star Wars influences how you go about things. First of all, congratulations on the 6 BFSA Awards. I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier.
They're not awards, they're nominations.
They're nominations.
The nominations,
Still nominations is
Thank you.
Really amazing.
Thank you. And I had a Nebula. I'm a Nebula finalist from 2024.
Amazing.
And I was a BSFA finalist that year, and I was longlisted for British Fantasy Award as well as a Lodestar, which is like the young adult equivalent of the Hugo. It's been a crazy couple of years, but to get 6 BSFA nominations, it's British Science Fiction Association nominations, is the most I've ever had at once in writing. And so that to me is definitely different. And also several of my writers and artists under my imprint got nominations as well at Stars and Sabers Publishing. So
that's amazing.
Both of these, I think, represent kind of a shift for me. And we'll see, but I do feel like I'm extremely proud of the Stars and Sabers authors, and they're all incredible. And I feel like it's almost, I can't believe that I get to read their books, their short stories. I get to commission their art and direct it to some extent, which is amazing. And I think without my art background, that might not have been as possible. But, Star Wars, coming back to that, I also was paying attention to production, direction, acting, art, and all of it, and steeping myself in that without really realizing it until much later, and how paying attention to how important design is in world building, in the immersion.
Yes.
You have to make it believable. You also want it to be both beautiful and stark, and if you don't feel it's real, you don't feel as invested. So I appreciated that George Lucas was always trying to make it feel as real as possible. And I wanted to do that both in my fiction and in my design, essentially. And as far as the science aspect goes, I was always a nerd. I was always outside as much as I could possibly be. And I was learning about nature constantly. So even though I had a strong interest in astrophysics, I ended up going into life science, and I have a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology. So coming from that angle of world building, you begin to understand aspects of how to make a world seem more realistic. So I have given talks for both science fiction, fantasy, and horror about using ecology and world building for those genres for your books and short stories. And I could talk at length about it. I already have, will again, probably. But there's a way in which you make the interactivity between the living and non-living elements in a world, no matter if it's in space, if it's on an exoplanet, if it's in a fantasy land, if it's in a haunted house, or on a spaceship with a xenomorph, So there's a way to use the science to kind of help your world building there. So having Star Wars in Dune and, Ursula K. Le Guin's books and things like that, like all of these things growing up and Pern with the dragons and Foundation, anything by Bradbury, it's just having all of that and kind of understanding that science has a role to play in speculative fiction, and you don't have to toss it aside to have a magical world. It can actually enhance it. So, but having Star Wars give us all these different ecosystems and having to deal with them and, how it affects the characters and the action and the emotion of the moment. I mean, God, Luke was out frozen on Hoth. That's an environmental situation that he's trapped in, in circumstance, and how do they deal with it, and Dagobah has its own issues. And obviously Mustafar has, freaking lava spouting out everywhere. And Mandalore is quite fascinating to me too. So I love all of that richness. And so I feel like everything that I've worked on has kind of allowed me to take those lessons from Star Wars and apply them to my own world building and to my imprint for what I want to see to a certain extent, but not all encompassing. So
amazing.
I love the fact that you write in horror, fantasy, and sci-fi, because thriller. I think all those are in some ways linked.
Yeah, I agree.
In a way,
speculative fiction. Yeah.
Yes. As an author of all these genres, what do you think Star Wars is fantasy with sci-fi elements, or sci-fi with fantasy elements, or is there another way of looking at it? A space opera is said a lot. And then in general, what do you think are the differences between sci-fi and fantasy?
I think Star Wars has a lot of both sci-fi and fantasy mixed. You have a supernatural element on several levels, actually, not just the Force. You have obviously ecosystems and, space, different things. I know that it bends, some of the laws of physics because it is sort of this other system, but it's in another galaxy, far, far away, long, long ago. You can kind of, wave your Force hand. But I feel like there's been a lot of discussion, and I've been part of the discussion about there being science in Star Wars as well as there being fantasy in Star Wars. So I've been on both sides of those discussions at different conventions and also online and just in my own thinking and writing. So I feel like it's both. I don't gatekeep and say that there's no science fiction in Star Wars. Come on. And I don't say there's no fantasy. I feel like gatekeeping is a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap. Yeah.
So, it's a trap that no, but it doesn't do anybody good because, I don't want to gatekeep, but I want to keep an open mind. And I feel like that's a great approach to loving these things and understanding the craft and the work that goes into them. So, and I'm not sure if I've answered all your questions there or if
that's all right. One of the things, what you said about gatekeeping, you said it in a way that I've never seen it from that point of view before, which I glommed onto, which is gatekeeping is a form of closing your own mind. It's not just closing out other people from it, but it's also closing your own mind to it and what could be possible in that world. And I just think that's it's an interesting way of looking at gatekeeping, because I agree with you. Gatekeeping is like the scourge of our of all fandom, regardless if you're gatekeeping NFL team stats or Star Trek's Starfleet Academy. It's
I just think I agree with you. It's a way of just creatively shutting down, and that's a new way of looking at it for me.
I will say, though, that there's such a strong emotional connection to these properties. That
Yes.
these are our modern fairy tales. And for some people, that's what gave them safety, comfort, and joy.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was a particular one and they don't see beyond that one, we have to give each other grace too. As long as we're not hurting each other, I want to kind of say that, like, for some people, and someone very close to me who is a lifelong Star Wars fan, like, kind of can't get into the newer ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't insult them, but he that was his comfort, safety, and joy.
Yeah.
And I respect that too. So I definitely wanted to address that because, I mean, even those of us who have been like original trilogy people, like I love all Star Wars. I love all Star Trek. To me, more is more.
Yes.
And I like the expansion of genre across the board, and within properties. And I feel like there's so much to play with there. To me, it's like the sandbox, right? I don't want a closed sandbox. For me, I'm the one who's just running out into the woods, but I feel like to understand each other better, we have to understand that, for some people, some things are crystallized and there may be a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as long as we aren't hurting each other, then may the force be with us all.
I love that. Some things are crystallized. What a beautiful...
crystallized.
Yes, I love that. And thank you for bringing that to our show, because that's honestly our entire mission here with what we're doing, is taking hate out of that Star Wars debate and recognizing that there's Star Wars for everybody. And
that's it. Because you will always have that trilogy. Someone was talking to me about my books and about if one of my books was made into a movie, how would I feel if certain things were changed? And it's not my book or my whatever. I'm like, the books are always there.
Yes.
And so if someone takes one of them and adapts it a certain way, that doesn't take away from what I made. That's still mine. And, that's, when you get a film adaptation, there's a certain aspect to it. Like, you have to kind of let go. If you want to. Not everybody, you don't have to have, if somebody approaches you, please, with an option offer, you got to think about it. You got to have a legal team with you because you don't want to get taken advantage of, and an agent pref or legal team. And so, there's that crystallization in your mind too, but you have to be open to the fact that, like, well, do you want more people into your universe or not? And so if I were given the option, quite literally, I would probably say yes under the right circumstances, because then it would open up the universe to more fans.
Yeah.
And I can't be too precious because I will always have those stories. So, I feel like there's just opportunity for myself. There's opportunity for everybody. And we will always have Star Wars,
Absolutely. And one of the things about sci-fi, horror, and fantasy is there's speculative fiction that really explores. It could explore aliens, dragons, monsters, but they're really talking about the human condition. What are some of the ways you think Star Wars is talking about the human condition?
Well, obviously, in terms of the original trilogy, family is everything and paramount and central to the plot. And so, but so is knowing that not everybody is a princess. Not everybody has had a privileged life. Right. Not everybody has been on the right side of the tracks. Some people are pirates. I feel like, and that's why we all love Han Solo, of course, and Lando and everybody, it's just, even the bad guys are human. And I think in Andor, it really explores that human condition for some of the villains. It doesn't defend, but it shows you. And I appreciate that. So I feel like the human condition is always explored in good fiction and in good film. And when you put the ordinary into the extraordinary, how does that transform you? Or if you put the extraordinary into the ordinary. I mean, look what Obi-Wan had to give up because his brethren were slaughtered. And he is, alone on this desert planet. He gave up Satine, his love. because of his ideologies and his true belief in the Force and the good that it can do, and so I love all these different explorations of the human condition. I love the interplay between what we believe and perceive versus what is real, and Palpatine trying to put his thumb on the scale so many times to mess with that, to manipulate, to betray, to get power, and so Star Wars is full of these examples, and sometimes the human condition is explored via droids and creatures, and the interplay between all of them. Like 3PO and R2 are buddies, but they bicker all the time. And what does that say about friendship and how we can connect, even though we're quite different in looks and size and personality, and yet you can still be friends. And that, of course, is reflected in fantasy often, and in horror, it's a matter of like, who's going to survive? You got to team up. You've got to work together,
Yes. I really like the idea of C-3PO and R2-D2 as the odd couple.
The odd couple, right.
And I also, one of the things in Star Wars that I always really appreciate is how slice of life it is, because in a very small moment, it can say a lot. And the moment I'm thinking of is from Return of the Jedi, when Luke kills the Rancor. And then there's the Rancor Keeper who's like...
Yeah, he's crying. He's devastated.
He's crying. Yeah. His pet is dead. And it's
like, wait a minute. This wasn't a monster. This was someone's beloved companion animal,
Yeah.
And that, of course, underlies the Jabba's like terrible manipulation, of having slaves and having prisoners, and how, these are real beings that love and are loved, and, that wasn't okay. So, and it was just tragedy, that these side players get sucked into this massive battle without their consent, without ever wanting to have been part of it. I feel like Andor underlines that with a big, bold line.
Yes.
But in terms of the animals and the droids, maybe a little bit, but not as much in Andor. Andor's very human, at the end of it.
Yeah, it is extremely so. I think I said it earlier, but for me, within the Star Wars universe, it's the closest to kind of hard sci-fi. Where I think a lot of the other, and I love it for it, is a lot of the other elements, a lot of the other Star Wars is a little more fantasy.
I mean,
or space opera.
I would call it more political sci-fi than hard sci-fi, to be honest. Because
that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
You think about hard sci-fi, you're really pushing the science element, and
it's true.
I don't know, and does some of that. It's less reliant on the Force, even though that does come up occasionally. But it's more of a political sci-fi. I would classify it as that. And in terms of hard sci-fi, that's when I think, like Foundation to a certain extent, Dune to a certain extent, although the genres like to bleed in from the edges.
Oh, yes.
In all of these, and we have to kind of put the fantastical into the science fiction because we're projecting a possible future or past or something, that is, we don't see it. We're working with what we know in science and applying what we know in terms of those laws and paradigms toward the fiction. So I don't know. I mean, there's definitely science fiction, hard sci-fi in Andor. There definitely is a fantasy element, but it's so political and it's so emergent. Like there's a term in ecology, we call it emergent properties. And what it means is that something is greater than the sum of its parts. And Star Wars has emergent properties. So it is more than any of these things.
That's it. Yeah. It's bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
This is kind of a goofy question that I like to ask authors.
I love goofy questions.
But as a sci-fi and fantasy author, how do you come up with names for characters?
Ooh, yeah.
They just pop right out of my head like champagne bubbles.
Really?
Do they really?
Most of the time. Because my entire life I've been coming up with bizarre names since I was very young.
Yeah.
I was talking about that journal earlier so recently I actually took ideas from my 10-year-old self and as a 50-plus person put some of those names in a fantasy novel I've got coming out because I was like, you know what, I actually really like that name. So I'm going to use it again. But I always was toying with names. It did help that I was very strong in English. And then later, I studied Spanish, but then I also, in college, though, I studied Latin, and I was part of a Latin honor society, and I was immersed in translating. I translated the Aeneid, so I was fascinated, of course, by Tolkien coming up with his own language. So I came up with my own language as a young kid too, but it was simpler. It was more of like a code language, and I even used the name for it in something else in one of my books. I'm not going to say what, but spoilers, as River Song would say. So I feel like for me, it was just I was always coming up with names. It was part of what I did. It was just kind of for me a hobby to come up with names. I would make lists and lists and lists of names, and I would just mix and match and everything. It's just something I do, and I love coming up with unique, brand new names. I also coming up with titles like chapter and book titles, and I love it. I don't know why. It's just something I love to do.
On the flip side of that, you once posted you're going to tell yourself you're done telling stories, and it's important you don't listen to that advice.
Yeah.
And I'm curious where you think that voice comes from and how you overcome it.
Came from grief, devastation, personal devastation. I've lost now 3 very close family members within 6 years, and several other relatives and friends. And it's just, I did tell you there was a dark time in my fiction in which I wasn't writing. I was in college, but there were other things happening in my life. And it wasn't until I had my kids and we were at school, and there was a dad, and he was an editor, and he was like, why aren't you finishing these books? And I was like, I don't know, man. He's like, you got to do it. And so I call him the man who saved Heliopause because, he was the one who was there just encouraging me to finally get something done and out in the world. And that was priceless. He was in the right place at the right time as a friend.
Yeah.
But overcoming, grief is sort of trickling into everything I write now. It kind of can't help it. I try to, for the campiest stuff, I try to keep it at bay, but it's still there. And I feel like that's a hard thing to deal with. You have to give yourself, and this is what I tell every writer and creative, you got to give yourself grace. You can't be punishing yourself for what the world is doing, for what's inside your home and what's outside the door. You've got to take care of yourself. And that may mean that you've got to step away for a little while and come back. But it's always there. So don't give up on your own creativity. Sometimes you just have to take a break. Some people don't do that. Some people approach it like always doing something every day. I'm not one of those. Because, as a mom, there were times in which I was so exhausted, and I was like, how am I going to finish this book? How am I going to do this? And then I would wait till the kids were in bed, and I would just bang out as many words as fast as I could, but when it comes to grief, that's another level. It's so exhausting and dispiriting. And you wonder why am I doing this? The people who believed in me the most are gone. Why do I keep doing this? So you got to do it for you.
Yeah.
You got to do it for you. Give yourself grace, do it for you. If you want to honor them, that might be another way to do it, is to write knowing that you're honoring them in some way because they believed in you.
This may be an obvious follow-up, but did you find in your writing that it helped you process the grief or the pain?
Definitely. It's kind of, it would be, for me personally, it would have been, I think, strange for it not to have happened that way. And it's interesting talking about that dark period of time, like the 90s were very hard for me. That's starting to come out in my fiction, like the Atacama. I worked in research for a while, and there were dynamics that were in play in the 90s and early 2000s, working in research and science. And let's just say, if you didn't have a PhD, it was a little bit harder for you. And I didn't, I was a worker, and I was, doing experiments, but not getting credit for them. And, it was just, but the culture in academic research and then in biotech, which is very different, nonprofit and for-profit are very, very different, but there's still this superiority. And there's a level of competition and weirdness that I kind of got burned out on and jaded, and so I don't know. I feel like that's starting to come out in my writing. Because Atacama is, sci-fi horror thriller. It's also an examination of coming from Appalachia and being thrown into an extraordinary situation, but also dealing with very interpersonal grief, the loss of, in that case, a friend, and then finding yourself embroiled in something bigger than you can understand, and being destabilized, and people taking advantage of your grief, which unfortunately is a thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to be too dark, but I feel like we've shown ourselves that any, not weakness, but any trait can be used against us.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I feel,
welcome
or
to
someone,
planet Earth, you know.
yeah. There's always someone there willing to take advantage of, and to bring it back to Star Wars. That's one of the things that I also find within its philosophy is there's always a bigger fish. You know, there's always one of the elements, and we'll get to well, I'll ask now. I maybe a kind of maze way of landing this plane by 11 a.m. Just a quick question: is it okay if we just go 5 or 10 minutes over if necessary?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. But speaking of those elements, what are the top 3 elements that make Star Wars to you?
Escape. That is definitely one of the reasons it probably ever happened, you know, because Lucas was building his own universe to escape. And that's not a criticism. That's joy.
No.
And adventure, but also survival. And I don't mean just as a day-to-day survival, but also as culture survival, as soul survival. Good versus evil does come down to shades of gray sometimes, and isn't always black and white. But you know, the goal is that we survive, and so I feel like those things.
That's great. That's awesome. It's like very deep elements, I think, within the Star Wars universe. It's in thinking about the future of Star Wars. You had mentioned, you know, sharing it with your teenagers. Is it a fandom that went from your dad to you, and now from you to your kids?
Well, I should clarify with Dad, it was simultaneous. Like we both saw the movie at the same time. And so that was simultaneous. But
I was thinking maybe the sci-fi nerd aspect of it. Like,
well, Mom was as much a nerd, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it was Dad who took me, you know, to Empire. But Mom was along and saw it all too. You know, and she was the one who was watching all the B-movie stuff and Lost in Space, and she was all in Star Trek. And Dad was less invested in. He was more like a 2001 guy, but Mom was like into the more pulp 50s stuff. So I feel like that was a really good.
She sounds rad.
Saturation. She was like when cable and VHS started coming online. She was the one that made sure we had everything. That we had.
Love that
stuff I shouldn't have seen, but like everything. So she was all in on that, right? And that was definitely a big help. And also, she was my first editor and my best editor. So I missed them terribly. But so in terms of like, I mean, I definitely, my kids were going to be nerds. You know, like their dad is a super nerd, and that was we're best friends, and to this day, and we met in college, and we were both artists, and that was how we met. And we realized we were all in on the same things, and he was completely obsessed with Star Wars. He was all into Dungeons and Dragons, and you know, and then he saw all these characters I had made, and you know, so it kind of felt like as we wove into and out of each other's lives over the decades, and we finally had kids, that it was just sort of unavoidable that, of course, our kids were going to see that we loved these various nerdy things. And they were definitely all in, and they've gone their own way, you know, and they make their own universes. They both write and they do art, and they're coming up with their own characters and maps and universes. So they definitely are falling from both our trees in wonderful ways. And it's been great to see them, what they have enjoyed and what they haven't in terms of Star Wars. And that's been actually hilarious. So, but awesome, you know, like.
Yeah.
My older teen saw Andor first and was like, "Why aren't you watching this yet?" You know, and I was like, "Oh my god!" You know, so and you know, and they're more into gaming than I am. I have to be careful with gaming because I have a balance issue and it can mess with me. So, which breaks my heart. But we also were always on the analog side too. We were doing board games and action figure play and everything. So they had exposure to all that. And it's just so rewarding to see them both finding their own way in the universe.
Yeah.
Galaxy. Yeah.
That's amazing.
What would you like to see in the future of Star Wars?
More horror.
Okay.
Yes.
I also want to see, I want Lando. I thought it was going to be a show. Sounds like it might be a movie, but I really want to see more of the sort of seedy underbelly of the galaxy.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of fun stories you could tell there, and I would actually really love to write some of those. Listening, anybody?
Yes.
I know a lot of Star Wars writers personally, so
We'll start the petition. Yeah.
I know, right? I feel like I would love to see those things. I also would like to see I'd like to see some science aspects in Star Wars.
Yeah.
It would be really fun to get something that really kind of addresses that side of Star Wars, the science side. So horror but also, but for real, espionage. I want spy thriller Star Wars more than anything else.
Yes.
Yes.
We got glimmers in Andor and glimmers in Skeleton Crew, and I'm with you.
I'm all about spy thrillers. That's one of my favorite things. I'm actually going to be publishing an anthology of spy thriller stories. So I am all in on the spy thriller thing. Please give me, give me the slow horses of Star Wars, or give me the 007 of Star Wars, or give me some interplay of all those in which, we have both the high glamour side of it as well as the ridiculous side of it. And I just think that's just ripe for the picking. There's so much fun you could have in the Star Wars universe with spies of all species. We've got double agents, triple agents, we got shapeshifters. Let's go.
Yes. Is there anything about your Star Wars fandom that we didn't ask you that you'd like to add?
Ooh.
Well, I don't know. We've covered a lot. We haven't talked about fashion. We haven't talked about fashion. Can we talk about that? I'm serious.
Can go.
Yes.
So, I'm so on. Yes, absolutely.
So as I told you earlier, I was designing fashions, thousands of them for my characters, not all of which are human, right? So one of the reasons I want to talk about it is because fashion is world building.
Yes.
And when you look at the various environments, cultures, political side of things, costuming plays a story in all movies and shows and stage plays. And it is part of world building, which I think is essential. Yeah. And you pay attention to the details, and they make contrasts within who a character is and isn't.
Yeah.
One of the things I absolutely loved about Andor, of course, obviously the beautiful fashions of some of the characters, but also the very rustic ones of others. But the moment that he gives Mon Mothma that jacket, I was like, please, let's go. And then you see her shift as she becomes the real deal rebel.
Yes.
And then she strips it all away. And to me, Mon Mothma, I could just go on for days about her journey and throwing off the trappings. And you can call trappings a true trap. It's a trap. It's a trapping. Where it is, it is part of who you were, but you have to throw that aside. And you have to put on a new jacket, a new cloak, a hood or whatever. Let's face it, the hood thing is symbolic for Sith. And, I would talk about fashion a lot, given the opportunity in the Star Wars universe. Obviously, you see it as well with the world building with Padme and the structure in which she grows up and what she has to deal with in her path, from a child queen to a senator to the wife of a Sith Lord. And then stripping it down at the end when she's dressed very simply, and it's all torn away. It's so all of it. I could talk about days. Pay attention to costuming and world, but there's so much craft that goes into it, so much thought from the design to people sewing on freaking beads. There's no CGI could never, even though it's used on some creatures, it's still not a substitute for real cloth, how it moves, how it functions, how it needs to function in different environments. That was another thing I loved about Empire was that out of the gate, you had these snow outfits and how you're coping with the cold. And then she gets on, Leia gets on Cloud City and she's given these beautiful dresses. Yeah. She's like, it's from him,
Yeah.
Which was kind of I felt like was hilariously kind of a nod to Raiders of the Lost Ark, with Marion and the dresses.
Yes.
So I just love that facet of world building because it's something that I think maybe not everybody thinks about when you're building an exotic world, but you need to. In Dune, it's obvious. You have the still suits. If you don't have one, you don't survive without considerable trouble, and that is the most efficient way that the Fremen could survive, right? So I just really feel like fashion is everything. I like in Star Trek how you immediately know where someone is based on their insignia, their outfit, what rank, what it is. And so these are visual cues, but also there's a world building for the people who are wearing them. Like you can really imbue the character when you are in their clothes, quite literally. So priceless.
I'm so excited by this. If you're amenable at some point, I'd love to have you back to just talk costumes, maybe for a segment.
Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir. Let's go.
One of my most prized possessions, treasured possessions, is my out-of-print Dressing of a Galaxy, the Trisha Brigger.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah,
so
I could
totally
go on
down.
and on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely something I'll be talking more about, too. I've tried to talk about it in the past, and people are like, and I'm like, really? No, we need to talk about fashion and sci-fi and fantasy and horror, and also the different cultural differences. I mean, the Alien universe is another great example.
Yes.
Where you have like the trucker vibe versus like the Weyland-Yutani sleekness and sinister, that. And in a lot of ways, Star Wars was kind of similar until, you really started to get into more political stuff. So I really love that whole subject.
Well, to be continued.
Absolutely. Because it does say so much about character, and it also gives the audience so much clue about story.
Yeah,
absolutely does. And in any way, too. So there's two fashion bloggers I love named Tom and Lorenzo, and they talk about shows and movies all the time, and they cover awards and red carpets. But one of the things they kept coming back to in some of the shows, such as Mad Men and other shows, was like you could see whose family. Because in a lot of the ways, costumers, costume designers, and fashion people on production will make it sort of like a family crest that you can see that there's a unification between outfits. There's a language that's being spoken. And if there's an aberrance from that, then you can see that there's discord. I love that layered aspect of world building too.
Yeah. And I think you brought it up with a great example of Mon Mothma in Andor.
Yeah, she's the perfect example.
Chandrila's entire culture in their clothes is beautiful world building. Some of the best I've seen in anything. Yeah.
And you know that's him, but also, gore.
Yeah.
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 So our last question for you, after we've talked about your writing, how Star Wars influenced your need to create as a child from a very early age, how you were, through all your nerdiness, inspired not only into the fantasy but also the scientific, this idea of almost metamorphosis as you changed from decade to decade through different kind of life events, from sharing it with your entire family, sharing Star Wars with your entire family, to sharing it like as you grew up, and now sharing it with your family that you're growing up. After talking about all of this, can you say, what does Star Wars mean to you?
Possibility. It's knowing that we can dream of different possibilities, and we don't know everything. But we can learn to defend what we believe in. We can learn to hope, even in darkness. We can learn to be friends with people who are very different from us. We can learn to build. There's so much possibility in Star Wars. And I feel like, obviously, hope is mentioned a lot, but the two are, part of the same DNA, double helix, hope and possibility.
Yeah.
And by having hope, it opens up more possibility, and having possibility can lead to hope. So
that's spectacular.
I've said this before on our show. I always feel like, and I think it's echoed throughout the fandom. When you talk about Star Wars, you're talking about life.
Yeah.
Then I also feel like we get the guests we need when we need them for our show. Yeah. And today, like, your perspective, and especially around grief, like, has been very needed for me personally in my own world. And it's just been a real pleasure to get to know you and to hear your perspective. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
You've all had such good questions. It's been a lovely discussion, and it's helped me. When I address grief to people who are willing to listen, that helps me deal with it. It helps me honor the people who are gone, and it helps me to remember why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Well,
all right.
Jendia, where can people find you? You have some books coming out. You have a Choose Your Own Adventure book coming out. I feel like it's a very big year for you. I'm very excited for you. Where can people find you, follow you, find out more about you?
So I have 4 books coming out this year.
That's amazing.
And I also have a short story coming out in an anthology, which is a Weird West horror short story.
Nice.
So I have my first book that comes out is my fantasy debut. It's called The Vale of Seven Dragons, VALE. And that will be on global pre-order very soon. And it comes out early April. In late April, I have an actual real Choose Your Own Adventure book called Dungeon Crawl at the Haunted Mall. And that's available.
Love that title.
It's so good.
So it is very much 80s, 90s coded. It's about a haunted mall and this young group of tweens who they're going to for their YouTube or whatever channel, vlog channel, they're going to go explore this abandoned mall, not realizing that what they thought it was closed for, a toxic river spill in the 80s, it was actually a warlock from another dimension that opened the mall. And then they go and they realize that their friend Drea is missing. Do they go into the mall and try to find her? And what happens next is insane. It's a very fun book. It's very warped. I'm extremely warped. And
I love it.
The illustrations made me just guffaw. So that's really fun. I'll be on tour for that book. My third book out is Godfestation, which directly addresses grief, particularly over my father. And it starts where I'm from in East Tennessee. It ends up being a journey in a literal and figurative sense. And that's a novella coming out in August. Godfestation is up for pre-order. It's a haunting sort of horror fantasy allegorical journey. And then under my former pseudonym, J. Dianne Dotson, I have the final volume of the Amethyst Lantern series, which is a lunar punk futuristic sci-fi fantasy universe set in our future, but with villains from our time. And a little bit of Wrath of Khan nod there. But the final book is a prequel that starts in our era, that starts to tell you how it got to the point, and the characters who are ancient in the first 2 books, they're like my age, our age in the present, and what happened to them and how did they deal with the catastrophe and come out of the other side. So that comes out in October. I will be at several conventions this year around the country, possibly overseas. You can find me via my website, jendiagammon.com. That is JendiaGammon.com. I am on most social media. The links are on my website in the footer, and there's links to my books on the website. I'm very active on Threads and Instagram, and to a certain extent, Blue Sky. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on, TikTok. But I really have found Threads to be a great community, particularly in fandom lately. It's been connecting me with a lot of really wonderful people in real time almost. So I definitely I'm out there, so, and I love talking about Star Wars anytime.
We'll have all those links as well in the podcast notes. So if anyone wants to just jump down into there, you can click directly to JendiaGammon.com, and those will be there. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been
Dave. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah,
may
the force be with you.
May the force be with you.